So you survived your first batch of soap. We have done lye safety. We have done material sourcing. We have done oil sourcing. We have made a batch of soap. You have survived it. And now we are on to, the finer points in all of this. And those finer points are called the oils, what they do, and more importantly, how to substitute them. Because any person can follow a recipe, but a really good soap maker that's going to increase their soapy knowledge knows how to make substitutions within said recipe. So that's what we are talking about today. And I'm going to tell you more about that in just a minute. But before I do, hello, I am Mrs. Soap and Clay. Let's make stuff. How's it going, Sudsers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things, and you are here for day 329 of 365 days of soap. And today is part 5 of a 6-part series, pretty sure it's just 6-part, of all things back to basic cold process soap making. And we have covered, as I said, lye, material sourcing, things that you need to make soap, the actual making of soap, and a nice recipe. And today we are going to talk about the oils, or more specifically, how to substitute oils within a recipe. Because you're going to run into that problem right off the bat immediately for whatever reason. That reason may be you don't want to use palm oil, for example, or you want to specifically use a certain type of oil, or you ran out of olive oil. There are a lot of reasons that you are going to want to substitute oils in a recipe. And instead of just pulling your hair out, losing your mind, Googling to find a recipe that has every single oil that you want to use, it's much more logical and it's a much better idea to go ahead and learn about oil substitutions right away, so you can take any recipe and tweak it to make it your own using the oils that you want to use. So that's what we are doing today. It might be a long one. We're going to go to SoapCalc. Don't freak out. It's going to be cool, but we need to get to it. So when it comes to substituting oils, first and foremost, it's all about that fatty acid profile, baby. Just across the board, the fatty acids in your soap is what actually contributes to the performance of the soap and what it does. And so you, of course, have to look at the fatty acid profile and the different fatty acids that occur within a recipe or within an individual oil. Now, high level, you can say usually you sub hard oils for hard oils and soft oils for soft oils and butters for butters. Yes, but that's not always true, because there are a few curveballs out there, like castor oil, for example. It's a liquid oil-ish. So is jojoba-ish. They're technically not liquid oils, but they are liquid in nature. So why can't we just sub either one of those out for olive oil? Their fatty acid composition is wildly different. Another example is shea butter. Shea butter has a fairly high amount of unsaponifiables, so you have to pay attention to that too. But we're not really talking about unsaponifiables too terribly much today. Really what we want to focus on are just the fatty acid profiles, because that's going to be the better way to figure out what you can and cannot sub. And we're going to go to SoapCalc for this, but I don't want you to freak out. Do not click off the video. Do not start panicking in your brain ball. We are going to look at SoapCalc and the things that you need within SoapCalc, and I'm going to explain those things so you understand what it all is. It's going to be fine. It's going to be great. Let's do that. Okay, so as you can see, we have plugged in the recipe that we used yesterday into SoapCalc. So we have 33% coconut oil, 34% olive oil, and 33% palm, and it's giving us the ounces that we used yesterday. Now, as far as this area right here, the bar hardness and the INS and the iodine and everything, for right now, don't pay attention to that. That is not going to actually benefit you in any meaningful way. Realistically, never when it comes to SoapCalc. Unfortunately, the way that the program is, they've never actually been able to actually account for a lot of other factors in figuring out the hardness and the cleansing numbers or whatever. It's good to kind of give it a look, but for the most part, don't pay attention to that. What we really want to pay attention to is the stuff underneath your soap qualities like hardness et al. Those are your fatty acid profiles. Now, as you can see from this, we have palm oil currently selected in the list here. You can see that it's grayed out here. And so what we are looking at in this category is what the palm oil has, the fatty acids that are within palm oil. And what we are looking at in the category on the right here is the overall blend of each of these fatty acids within the entirety of this soap. So combining the olive oil, the palm, and the coconut oil. That too is not super accurate, so don't pay a ton of attention to that. But what you really want to pay attention to when you're looking at subbing oils is what these fatty acids all are and what is inside each of these oils. So as an example, we have for palm, obviously, we have a lot of palmitic acid, 44% to be precise. And then we also have 39% oleic, 10% linoleic, and a little bit of stearic in all of this, about 5% stearic. And so that's what the palm is comprised of. And just so you know that that's what SoapCalc is calculating, we'll just go ahead and click olive oil and see how everything changes there. Now we have 69% oleic, 14% palmitic, and 12% linoleic. And just for funsies, clicking on the coconut oil, you see that it changes again, and there's a bunch of lauric acid in coconut oil, 48%, 19% myristic acid, 9% palm, 8% oleic, and a little bit of linoleic and stearic. So those are the fatty acids that exist within this particular soap recipe. The oleic is obviously going to be for the conditioning and the moisturizing properties, which you're finding in really high amounts in the olive oil, but also decently high within the palm. And the lauric acid is going to give you your great big beautiful bubble, which you find in good amounts in the coconut oil, but nowhere else in any of these oils. And then we have the myristic and the linoleic, and the palmitic acid is for bar hardening, as well as skin conditioning to a point. And we see that in really all three of these oils, but in really high amounts within the palm oil itself. As for the rest of the fatty acid profiles and what they do, they're in such small amounts within this particular recipe that I'm not going to super touch on them. But if you are interested, I think I've done a video on all of the fatty acid profiles and what they do in soap. So I'll link it. So now that we know what each of these oils are comprised of, the bulk of the fatty acids, what now? Well, we need to find an oil that matches or closely matches basically the bulk, the biggest fatty acid profile that's within that particular oil, right? And we do that, we find the substitution by going to another tab within SoapCalc, because it really is a good tool to use, and looking at all the different properties. And this is actually a very cool blowout of all of the different information that can exist for oils. And again, a lot of it you don't need ever, realistically, but for sure not right now. We are just going to look at essentially the three big fatty acids that are in this particular recipe. So palmitic, oleic, and lauric, right? And so you can do that by clicking on that little tab there for lauric, for example, and it will give you a list of all the oils that contain the lauric fatty acid from greatest to least within the thing. And so you see coconut oil sitting there at 48%, and that's what we have. And so we would want something that resembles that in nature to replace the coconut oil, right? And so looking at this, babasu is obviously a very good option there. Palm kernel oil, also a good option. Going down below the 48%, we have a couple butters, some kind of fancy butters, a lot of fancy butters. No, it's kind of it. So your biggest subs are going to be babasu and palm kernel oil. Cool. How about for the palmitic acid, which we have the highest amount of palmitic in each of these oils is 44% within the palm oil itself, and the overall is 22%, right? 44%. So what matches that on this list? Well, we've got some really, the Japan wax and the palm stearin. The palm stearin isn't going to help you if what you're wanting is eliminating palm from your recipe. Neither will red palm butter. Coffee bean oil, wow, that's expensive. Not great. Okay, so tallow. It also has palm in it, shortening. So that's an option. And that's getting you kind of close if you go tallow, beef, or lard, or, you know, shortening. So there's an option. But what about for people that don't want to use, you know, animal products? Well, cocoa butter is going to be the closest, and cocoa butter is at 28%. And so you might need to get a little bit creative with the secondary oil in order to replace palm. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now, how about the next one, oleic acid? Well, oleic acid, if we look at where we find olive oil here, so olive oil coming at 69%, as we saw in the recipe. And there are a number of options. Canola oil, high oleic. Sunflower oil, there's tons of oleic acid in sunflower oil. Hazelnut, it can be expensive, and also nuts. Shea oil is expensive. Almond oil sweet is expensive, and also nuts. And then we have bear tallow, obviously olive oil pomace, apricot kernel, expensive, plum kernel expensive, peach kernel expensive, pistachio, canola. So a lot of options here ranging in expense, really, just within the 69% range-ish. Yeah, you can scroll all the way down and you can look at the oleic acid content in all manner of wild things that you could ever potentially put into a soap. For us, for our best bet, if we are going to be substituting like for like, olive, and keeping in the, you know, not animal products realm, it would be sunflower oil or canola oil or almond. There we go. We already have options for substitutions. So let's plug this in and see what the recipe ends up looking like if we start changing some of these. Okay, so instead of going with the coconut oil for this, which you see has the lauric at 48 and the myristic at 19, which are going to be your big things that the coconut oil is really adding to the bar, let's try babasu. And the lauric changed not much, right? It's a 50% lauric, 20% myristic, and it also has more palmitic in it. And, you know, just for funsies, let's check it out and let's look at the palm kernel oil. And palm kernel oil, lauric and the myristic are palm kernel oil. It's an almost dead-on dupe for what coconut oil does to a bar. So for funsies, so we can remove anything that says palm in our recipe, let's plug babasu in place. As you can see, the overall composition here for the bar changed a little bit in the lauric in that it increased. The myristic stayed the same, and the palmitic increased a little bit as well. It's not bad. That's a good sub. All right, cool. Love to see it. And how about olive oil? 14% palmitic, 69% oleic. Let's go ahead and plug in canola oil. We can do the high oleic, which comes in at 74% oleic, or the regular oleic, which comes in at 61%. I'm going to use the regular. I know people like saying that canola oil produces dreaded orange spots. I use canola oil in almost every single recipe. That I do, just in general. And in a pinch, it is wonderful to substitute for olive oil. And I've never had dreaded orange spots. So I like canola oil. The oleic and the palmitic are less. The linoleic is quite a bit more. But remember, we're going to be running into the issue of, if we remove palm from this recipe, really decreasing palmitic oil, and so might not be the best bet. Let's see what else we could potentially do from this list. Sunflower oil, high oleic. You gotta specifically do that with that guy. So the oleic increases a lot, linoleic decreases from the olive, and the palmitic goes way down. So not great. Okay, now putting in the almond oil, the palmitic is closer to what it was with the olive. It's still a little bit less. The oleic is almost dead on, and the linoleic is a little bit more. So, not bad, for sure. The thing about sweet almond oil is going to get people who are allergic to nuts, and they're going to see almond oil on your label. They're not going to buy it. And so, got to be careful with the nut allergies for sure if you're going to be selling. If you're not, and you're just doing it for a hobby and ran out of olive oil but weirdly have almond oil around, yeah, use that thing. But this right here is the one that I prefer to use, the rice bran oil for a substitution of olive or a portion of olive. Reasonably what I would do with a recipe like this, if I was out of olive oil, I would take the canola oil because it's high in the oleic for sure, and use that as half of the required amount for the olive oil. And then go ahead and also put in rice bran oil for the other half of the olive oil. The reason for that is the palmitic acid. There's 22% palmitic in rice bran. And if I know I'm going to be eliminating palm oil and I'm going to need more palmitic, I would effectively sub both out for the olive. So let's do that for funsies and see what our end recipe looks like that way. Right, so there we go. We have split the difference between the canola and the rice bran to substitute the olive. And so far, so good. The recipe is still working, but we haven't messed with that palm yet. With palm oil, we've got 39% oleic, 44% palm, and we decided that we had two reasonably good options, right? We had shortening, which also contains palm, so not the best option. So let's go tallow for animal real quick just to look at it. And for those of you who do use animal, oils and fats in your soap making, that's completely fine. I have a vegan line, and that's just what I do. So with the tallow, the beef tallow, we're looking at 28% palmitic and 22% stearic, which is good because the stearic would actually do double duty for the palm and still going to get the bar hardening as well as the conditioning. While it's just over half of the palmitic fatty acid that's in palm oil, it works because it has way more stearic in it, so that would still be a really good option. And so let's look at the other reasonable option with all of that. And we're going to go cocoa butter. Again, it's about half of the palmitic that palm oil has, but way more stearic. So I love that. I love to see that. We are going to go ahead and include cocoa butter into this recipe, and we will put it at 33%, just like the palm, and we will remove the palm and recalculate. And there we are. So our end fatty acid profile is 17 lauric, wherein we had 16 in the previous, which is coconut, olive, and palm, and 7 myristic, did not change. 17 palmitic, our old recipe was 22%, so it's close-ish. 13% stearic, and before we only had 4% stearic. So this is great. Because again, for the bar hardening and for the skin conditioning, this is good to have extra stearic in there. It's making up the difference for the palm that we just lost. And going down to the oleic, this particular recipe has 32% now because we did lose some with taking out the palm. Before it was 39, and the linoleic is 10. It's also a moisturizing oil, so that's good. So it's very similar in fatty acid profiles. So doing that, if you were to run out of olive oil, you could substitute rice bran or canola or a combination of both. If you ran out of coconut oil, you could substitute babassu, or even better, if you're not opposed to using palm kernel oil, which would be the best direct dupe for coconut oil, and it's cheap. Babassu is expensive. And for the palm oil, you could substitute cocoa butter. But of course, cocoa butter is more expensive than palm. So, keep that in mind. But all things considered, that's a decent recipe swap if you are wanting to eliminate all 3 of those oils in this recipe and do the thing. It works. It's going to be more expensive, but it works. So yeah, when it comes to substituting oils, the best thing that you can do is learn the fatty acid profiles of the oils right off the bat and not just assume that a liquid oil versus a liquid oil, or even going to the little cheat sheets that Brambleberry and a lot of other companies have for substitutions. It's better to learn the fatty acid profiles. It also helps you get comfortable with using SoapCalc and go from there and substitute based on the fatty acids, not necessarily based on liquid oils and solid oils and butters being an equal swap. And of course, with all of that, we didn't touch on it, but you could see that the lye also will change with all of these because the saponification value of all of these oils are a little bit different. The lye amount is going to change very slightly, even with the complete overhaul of a recipe like this, but it will change a bit. So always run any new substitutions through SoapCalc or whatever lye calculator you like to use to make sure that your lye is dialed in. But to that is really how you substitute oils. There is no other secret or, weird little trick or whatever that, master soap makers like myself have. I just have been doing this for so long that I know the fatty acid profiles of all of the oils that I would reasonably have or can source quickly. So I know the right substitutions. And also I've played with it. And also I played with SoapCalc. So if the biggest takeaway from all of this is sort of getting familiar and comfortable with what all of these numbers in SoapCalc are, then, awesome, for sure. But really don't be afraid of SoapCalc. It is a very useful tool in the soap making world, for sure. Again, I would not pay a whole lot of attention to the bar hardness and cleansing numbers because they still haven't been able to actually refine that particular piece of it. But the rest is really good information. And you can do all of that from the comfort of your own home and your computer or your phone and not have to go to 14 different Google searches to look up fatty acid profile of X, Y, or Z. I will link the actual areas in SoapCalc that I used. I will also link down below some cheat sheets that you can just print out and have handy if you don't want to go the fatty acid profile route. I really do recommend learning the fatty acid profiles. It's actually a lot of fun when you get into it. You start feeling like a chemist, like a mad scientist, and chemistry is my jam. So if you guys start geeking out on the mad science world, I get happy. So there's that. I hope you guys had a good time with all of this. Hope you learned some stuff, all of the things. I appreciate you for being here. I think this is a really good way for you to approach substituting oils. And with all this information so far, you are ready to go off and do all of the cool things with soap making kind of on your onesies. And, come back for references whenever you need, obviously. So the last part of this, I'm pretty sure is the last part, unless you guys request something additional, is going to be designs. We've gone through the chemistry, we've gone through the safety, we've gone through the process, we've gone through all of the equipment, we've gone through the science. Now let's get on to techniques and designs, and some that you should really work on in the beginning stages of soap making because they are going to be your workhorses. So that'll be tomorrow's video. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you guys each and every day. Today's no exception. I'm out of here, but I will see you guys all again tomorrow for another round of soapy fun. Bye.